Hi, welcome to a short video on the practical usage of Microsoft Excel's cube functions. In this video, I'd like to show you how you can customize pivot table reports. For other MS Excel solutions, you may visit my website ashishmathur.com. Okay, so here's what the base data actually looks like. It's a simple sales data set. It's a simple data set of about 1085 rows by, let's say, about 15 to 18 columns or so, with data for dates and description, year, month, segment, category, and so on. Now, in this video, I'd not like to show you how you can create a pivot table from this. In fact, that is what I'm taking as a given. So given this data set, what the person actually did was he took this data into the Power Pivot. So just to show you, if I go to the Power Pivot on the ribbon and go to Manage, the person who'd asked me this question actually took this data to the Power Pivot window. And once the data came over there, he, from this, created a simple pivot table. So that's the same table which I showed you. That's the base data. There's a calendar table over here as well. And once he got this data into the Power Pivot window, he actually went to pivot table and created a pivot table from this. The pivot table that he created looks something like this over here, where in the slicers he has the month. In the report filter, he has department and segment, where one can go and choose any of the specific departments. And in the row labels, he has something called OID underscore category, and he's written two calculated field formulas within the pivot table to compute month to date and year to date numbers. So this I'm taking as given. My objective is not to show you how this was done, but the question now that arises is something like this. Now, if you carefully observe the three colored rows over here, that's outstanding encumbrance, previous year carry forward, and revenue offset. These are part of this pivot table itself. Now, the request that actually came from this person was that I want to move these rows after the grand total row, but let it remain within the pivot table itself. So he wanted to actually customize the standard pivot table report that emerged from the Power Pivot window. So his desired Power Pivot should look as follows. If I go to the next worksheet, you'll see everything remaining the same. I have moved the revenue offset, outstanding encumbrance, and the prior year carry forward after the grand total row. And once I get these in their separate rows, there has to be a separate insertion of three subtotals over there. The first subtotal should be the grand total that I already have within the pivot plus the revenue offset. Then the subtotal here has to be the grand total plus the revenue offset plus the outstanding encumbrance, and the grand total has to be a summation of everything above. So that's the customization that he wanted to do within this pivot table itself. Now here's what my take on solving this problem actually is. So these are the steps that I perform. First and foremost, I created a copy of this pivot table. And what actually happens is once you create a pivot table from the Power Pivot window, you have the ability to actually convert this pivot table into a formula driven table. At the end of it, the fact is that even internally, Excel has some background formulas for computing these numbers. If you want to see what those formulas are, here's what you can do. Once again, this can be done only when you create a pivot from the Power Pivot window, not your conventional pivot tables. So if I select any one cell over here, in Pivot Table Tools, Analyze, under OLAP Tools, there's something called Convert to Formulas. When I click on that, it says by default conversion permanently replaces pivot table data values, row labels, and column labels by substituting formulas for them. If report filters exist, they remain so that you can still filter that data. Selecting convert report filters also permanently replaces existing filters by substituting formulas for them. So I simply let everything remain the way it is. I leave that box unchecked. When I click on convert, what actually happens is if you now observe any single cell of the pivot table, they've now been converted into cube formulas. So if I do an F2, I now actually see what Excel is doing in the background. Now, here is what I can do. So I cut this row over here, paste over here, cut this, paste here, and cut this, paste over here. I can now delete the three individual blank rows above, and the and here we wanted to generate a subtotal. Here was another subtotal, and here we wanted a grand total. So what I can do now for the subtotal here is write a simple sum function saying I want to sum these two numbers up over there, copy and paste. The same should work here as well, and I can simply copy the grand total here as well to exactly get what he wanted. And the grand total right now is incorrect because this also includes the data from the 3 rows outstanding encumbrance, prior year carry forward, and the revenue offset. So all I could simply do is I can subtract this number from here minus another subtraction over here and yet another subtraction of this number over here. Simply enter and I get a value error over there. So we'll see why that's actually coming in a while. If I copy this, paste this to the right hand side over there, I get value errors all across. So let's just see what the problem actually is there. Now, this looks like a blank cell, but let's see whether it is indeed a blank or not. To just check, if I do a this plus 1, I get a value error over there, which means this is actually not a blank. This has some other character in it. Now, I cannot afford to delete this cell because this is all happening via a formula, and therefore if I feed something in the base data, it should reflect inside this pivot table as well. And therefore, I'll play it safe by writing a simple if function saying um, if this is equal to a blank cell, then I want to show a 0, else I want to write the same formula there. I get zeros there, which I can copy and paste, and I'll do something similar for this one as well. If is equal to blank, then 0, else I can copy this cube formula and just format this as percentage. Okay, now I've done it for this here, I've done it for this row over here, and I need to do it for this one here as well. So if bracket open, this is equal to blank, I show a 0, else I show the same cube formula running again. As you can now see, all the errors have vanished because that the culprit cells seem to have some special character in it. So I have via nf function simply suppressed that to a 0, rather mask that with a 0. And it now seems to work well. Just to quickly cross check, if I were to select a different month over here, August, since they are all cube formulas, all the numbers update, and so do the subtotals and grand totals that we computed here down below. So that's the promise of the Power Pivot. Not only can you carry out calculations inside a pivot table which were erstwhile not possible to do with conventional pivot tables, but you can also convert a Power Pivot into a simple range with cube formulas running in them, allowing you to customize your pivot table reports even more. Right? Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed watching this short video.